Hello, hello. How is
Hello.
everybody? All right. How is everybody today? Good, I hope. We're going to share this and go live stream in just a second, and then we'll be back and get along with the program. And click. So we should be good to go there. Give it 1 second to get started. Then we'll do a screen share. We got some cool stuff today. Framon Manufacturing has actually taken the A1 jig that they used to sell and taken that over and redistributed it. So pretty cool. Give it 1 second to get started. That. So today, that's what we're going to be covering. Let's see here. Let's get back to this Zoom and let's do screen share. Okay. Screen share. All right, you guys can see a door with a lock, yes?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. You see your picture, no sound. Yeah, okay. We got 2 more people in the waiting room, so let's let them in real quick. And then we'll go ahead and get started. Oh my. Mute on that. All right, everybody have your microphones muted so that we can hear what's going on. So like I said, Phil with Framon Manufacturing has the A1 jig. They took that over, and it's really cool. I mean, it's simple, it's affordable, and it just plain works. And if you've ever tried to use those plastic jigs that they sell at the hardware store, I mean, it's no comparison. There's literally absolutely no comparison between this and that. It's night and day. This is a professional grade tool. The other stuff is a one-time homeowner. You buy it, you clamp it on the door, you pray like heck that it lasts that one installation, and then you throw it in the garbage, is pretty much what happens with those. So this one's all made out of aluminum and then hardened tool steel inserts. And it just seemed like a rock solid rig, so I wanted to show you guys how to do it. We're actually going to be doing the 1.5 inch installation today, rather than the typical 2 1/8 installation. And I think we have a video to convert that as well. You can also change backsets on this as well. So maybe you come up to a door and it's the wrong backset and it's the wrong size. Or if you have an 1.5 inch hole and you need to make it a 2 1/8 inch hole, you can do all of that with this jig. Okay, so this is the jig back out and re-offered through Framon Manufacturing. This used to be manufactured through A1 Products, which made a great quality product. All high-grade aluminum, hardened steel, tool steel inserts, very, very well built and rigid in its design. The front part here has 2 screws, Allen head screws for set. And I will let you know that I will show you some tips and techniques you may or may not have seen before, specifically with aligning the hole onto the frame. So if this seems a little basic and a little rudimentary, I want to make sure that we include all of the new people that are joining us as well, that maybe not have had as much experience as some of the other people have. But I'm pretty sure that every single person will gain just a little bit of information to maybe make that job just go a little bit smoother in the future. Screws for these internal 1.5 inch holes, and then it goes to 2 1/8 on the outside here. I'm actually going to install, I'd like to show you, it's not very common anymore, but I'd like to show you how to install an 1.5 inch sized, the old Schlage style 1.5 inch lock. So I'm actually going to do that, and then I'll show you how to expand that hole into the 2 3/4. It's going to fit most of today's more modern hardware on here as well. So we're going to go through all of that right here, right now. A couple of things that I'd like to bring to your attention is, notice that we have this blue tarp on the ground. Okay, we got blue tarp. It also has canvas backing. Okay, So this tarp is kind of the best of both worlds. It's going to catch those fibers and it's going to get the metal off of there pretty easily if you're drilling a metal door, but it's also got that cloth, so it's not going to melt straight through like hot metal on a plastic bag. You still don't want to get too much hot metal on this tarp, but it will deal with it a whole lot better than just a plastic tarp. And then, of course, we do one trip in, one trip out, one bag in, one bag out. All my hole saws, chisels, hammers, all that fun stuff is in here, ready to go. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to clamp this on there. Again, if you are drilling conventional hardware if you're drilling or prepping the door for conventional hardware, the very first thing you're going to need to do is take these two inserts out. They will not be used under most normal situations. So one of the first things I'm going to do is apply this to the door. These little guys here are your backset. Okay, so you flip them out of the way, and that's 2 3/8. You flip them forward like so, and all of a sudden you've got 2 3/4. So this is residential backset, obviously. Just gonna put this right here. Okay. And I'm gonna bring this one, I'm gonna back it off so that it's just barely not touching. Okay. And I'm gonna bring this one in. The other thing I want to tell you too is there's like a rubbery coating on here so that it doesn't scratch the door. Okay. So I'm just gonna zoom this in a little bit for you. That helps. Right there. So what I want is I want this to start getting snug before it touches this, but as I crank it down, I want it to touch this other adjustment screw right here. So that way what it does is it's clamping the door as evenly as possible, and then this piece here is actually throwing the weight back on the front of the clamp. So when we come in with our drill, it doesn't move it. Notice I cannot move this anywhere. Okay, it's not going anywhere. It's rock solid. It's steady on there. So the first thing we're going to do is this is an 1.5 inch bimetal hole saw. Okay, you can get an 1.5 inch hole saw in carbide as well. However, the bimetal will not cut into the tool steel here. It'll make sure that everything stays centered. Carbide will scratch and cut the tool steel, hardened tool steel insert. Therefore, that's why I'm not using that one. I only use that for stainless steel. As you can see here, okay, 1.5 inches. Cardboard door. Screwdriver, plug that out of there. Okay, so we're now all the way through both sides. One inch bulldozer. Okay. And then come this way. Notice all my mess and everything is right here on the tarp, right where it needs to be. Take this off. And get your center mark on your door, shove your drill bit in. That's a little tip or trick that I've come up with. Actually make a special little insert, but you don't need to do that if you use this little trick technique. So they sell a special little tool that goes in that 1-inch hole and you can press into the frame. You've already got a hole saw that fits that hole and a drill bit that's centered and aligned. Why not just use that? If you have the tool, great. I don't have anything against it. It's just a lot of times I don't have mine. So this works as well. Push it in, then it's going to give me a perfect mark over here. Okay. Just like so. Okay. That's another good reason to have the tarp on the floor. If you have the tarp on the floor and your drill bit falls out of your drill, like what just happened to me, it's not going to scratch or scuff your customer's floor. That's another great point. Keep in mind that our area here, a lot of times we'll be working in the Aspen area and you're literally working in a $50 or $75 million house. If you think that that drill bit falling and hitting the floor in a home that expensive is going to fly with the owners, you would be mistaken. They will get very upset with that. In fact, we don't even set tools on furniture. We lay out a tarp or some kind of a towel to be able to make sure that we do not scratch furniture or flooring, because you will fumble a drill bit. And I'm telling you, if that thing lands tip down into the ground, no matter which way it lands, it's taking a chunk. That drill bit or these edges hitting into that floor are definitely going to cause some damage. If the tarp's down there, it won't. It'll catch it. All right. And go from 2 3/4, 2 3/8, just like so. Yeah, lipstick is for Mrs. Locksmith, who is on YouTube. Just playing around, fun joke. So there's a lot of different ways to cut out the strike portion so that it's mortised in. I like to just bolt it in, line it up, get it real straight and nice, and then go ahead and screw it in place. And then you go ahead and,
306.45.
then you go ahead and trace around it, and it gives you a perfect pattern almost every time. I will admit I am no high-level carpenter. I install these to get them done adequately. Far better than a handyman. Not as good as a master carpenter. I'll go ahead and admit that, but usually it gets the job done nice and clean. This is also a 20-minute installation. I don't know how long it's taken most everybody else out there to install deadbolts, but 20 minutes is pretty slick. You're moving pretty good. I usually quote about an hour for them. All right, so nice. See, we drill it in dry. You can pre-drill those. This door is pretty cardboard, so I did not feel that pre-drilling was necessary on this one. Obviously, if you're working on a hardwood door or a real fancy door or something that's, solid wood, you're going to want to pre-drill those holes so you don't chance any splitting of the door itself. Same applies for the frame side as well. Sharp chisel. You can always tell how sharp your chisel is. It'll scrape a little fingernail stuff there. Great little tip for your chisel sharpening is I carry one of these Leatherman tools around all the time, no matter what. This thing is like part of my dress attire. There is a diamond blade file on this thing. It has diamonds embedded in it specifically for knife sharpening. If your end is a little crunchy or you hit a nail or it's just not as sharp as you want it to be, pull this sucker out, give it a couple strokes with it, and you're perfect. You're good to go. I usually also keep a diamond sharpener in the tool bag so that way I can sharpen and hone in the field. Nothing cuts like a freshly sharpened chisel. And if you don't want to damage and bruise the wood so you get a real nasty, ugly ring around it, you need to have a sharp chisel. So you can trace this out if you want to, or I just kind of mark around it. Some people will use a razor knife to razor knife around there. This works, it depends on how sharp your chisels are, but either one will work really nicely. An outline. It's really hard to get that just right on the thin doors too. So easy to blow out. fact, that's probably what I'm doing, is it was too close to the edge to do it while it was in there. So I wanted to remove it to make sure that we didn't blow the door out on the side. Barely, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so between the two sides. Gotta be real careful. You hit it too hard, right off the side it goes. And again, I'm no master carpenter. I know enough to get the job done and be dangerous. Then usually even without the hammer, you can come back and just use that chisel. As long as it's nice and sharp, this is that sharpness right here. Okay. You can just literally just shave that wood right out of there. And again, we are working on this cardboard door. So blowouts and little things like this right here are just, they're just part of the equation. They're going to happen.
I use a template and a router blade and a router, a portable router, and it does a perfect job every time.
Yeah, you sure can do that. That's great if you have the time and the ability to do that. The mess that the router makes and the noise is sometimes not appreciated by the customers. So it's a toss-up. A router's an excellent option. That's what the professional contractors use if you have that ability to do so.
There's a company called Templaco on the West Coast that makes a perfect router for
yeah,
and they also can buy a blade that goes with it, and I put that in my little router, battery powered DeWalt, and I've not had any problems with it ever, having blowing out a door out wood. I've even done it where the contractors actually cut a door so that the press would come out the end. You can't chisel those, but you can use this to do it.
You can. That's good. That's good to know. I'll have to look it up, and maybe we'll get a video review on that too.
I'll send you the link to it.
Send me the link to it for sure.
All right.
Thank you. Just for everybody that's just now joining, we used the Major Manufacturing Bullseye rig to drill this original hole. And we're actually installing an 1.5 inch diameter hole for the older Schlag locks. There's a couple other manufacturers that used them too, but really, really common was the old smaller Schlag locks. The reason I wanted to show the installation for that is you can show how the inserts work for the smaller dimension. And if you run into one in the field and you need to convert it to electronic access or a new, more modern deadbolt that needs the 2 1/8 inch hole, you can do that with this jig. You can change the backset and you can do everything you need to with it. You'll notice that I'm testing every step of the way. That way, if there's a problem, I don't have the whole thing put together. I can address the problem. I can back a screw off. I can add a shim. I can do whatever I need to do now. Because what happens on these thin doors is sometimes the screws come too close. They touch or they start binding the tailpiece. And if that happens, you got to loosen them up just a little bit to go ahead and get it to operate properly. So continually testing with fingers, use the key, use every aspect of it and test it. Every time I tighten a screw, every time I add a screw, anytime I change something, you test it, and then you don't have to go back and redo it, more than necessary. You'll know where the problem is because it stopped and it started on the next step. So you just go back one step, undo whatever you just did, and your problem is solved in most cases. Those interior screws, butter smooth. One finger either way. Okay.
What,
Alrighty.
what
Got this
email would I
small
send that
1.5
to?
What is it?
What email would I send that to?
Send it to the Tri-County Locksmith Service at gmail.com. I can put it in the chat box.
Okay.
Whole prep set up. Right now it's currently unlocked. Go ahead and lock it. Okay. Test it. Very good. We just installed this using the major manufacturing jig, and it did an excellent job. So now I'm going to show you, this is what it looks like to do an 1.5 inch prep right here. Okay, we've left those 1.5 inch holes or inserts in there. Now we're going to take these out and we're going to set this up to a 2 1/8 inch prep. All right, so we have a couple questions on that so far. Let me see here. We're running into the rounded edge instead of the type you're showing here. So a lot of times with Schleich products and a lot of different products, they'll offer the rounded edge. If you're doing the rounded edge, they do make a corner chisel. You're gonna get mixed reviews on that. I mean, like Jerry's saying, if you use a router, there's no hand chisel work that's going to do the work of a router. Okay. Not everybody has the luxury of having a router, the expense of having a router. Not every job is router friendly. And you know, I mean, if you're installing something on somebody's home and they're having a meeting or something, you're not going to be able to run those power tools. But I just want to show, you know, this is really focusing on this jig and the aspects of this jig. The more you take your time and the more you slow down, you can make it look as pretty as you want it to, but you're never gonna be able to hand chisel in what a router can do. So if you're gonna do round corners, they make a corner chisel. Do a simple Google search of corner chisel. That'll get you real close and it'll get the job done. If you really want to make them nice, follow Jerry's advice and use a router. Invest in the router and the template and the jig and all of that fun stuff for that. Okay. B160N. Somebody knows the part number for that. No finished plate. We put in whatever was in the box. If there was not a finished plate in the box, we did not put it on. Oh, cool. He's got his he's got the Tempco thing right there. I'm gonna grab that and I'm gonna put it right over here. And I'm gonna go right there and we'll take a look at that real quick. Maybe not. Latch and strike. There we go. Cool. All right, so they do have a bunch of different ones right here. They got a bunch of different templates and plates to put on there. Really cool, really nice stuff. I'll have to check that out and do some investigating in it. Really, our guys are just set up to do everything by hand right now. All right.
I've been using that. I found that about 5 years ago, and all my trucks have that on it. And when you get done, it looks just like it comes from the factory. And people love it. I've used it in all kinds of doors, solid doors, core doors, even doors that have been made, been cut down. If you, I have contractors who take a fiber door and cut it out so they can put it on a heater closet. Well, you can't chisel those in fibers. They just won't chisel.
Yeah.
This does it every time.
Yeah, that's great. I look forward to checking that out because it sounds amazing. Like I said, I'm just trying to we're going to take a look at this tool and what you can do with it with some basic hand tools. So we cover the full spectrum. People that just have hand tools have an opportunity to learn a few things and maybe find some things that they want to adjust or they will keep going the same way.
This will go very well with what you're showing here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We can make an expansion even. All right. So let's see. Now I think we're going to expand it to 2 1/8 inch. Nope. All righty. So no, that was not it. Let's try this one. All righty. So how many times does this happen where we need to put a new modern smart lock on our door and replace this deadbolt. And that seems like an easy enough task until we actually get in here and find out whether or not it's been prepped with a 2 1/8 inch hole or not. Now, there's several different ways to get that hole larger, and I'm going to show you one of the easiest ways today. So take this stuff off of here, just like so. Okay, and we have that teeny tiny little hole, only 1.5 inches. Okay, just like that. But we're going to have to make it 2 1/8. I have shown ways. My favorite way is to do it like this with the actual jig, but I have shown ways that you can actually stack your hole saws. So you can stack 1.5 inches on top of a 2 1/8, and you can actually use the 1.5 inches as your pilot drill, and it will bore out the larger hole. It just starts to get a little sketchy and a little, if things move, you can track across that door, you can open up that hole wider than you want it to. So it's a secondary recommendation as opposed to using the actual jig itself. Plus with the jig, and if the hole's this small, you can actually set the back set. You can change the back set. You can make it one or the other. You can move it at this point. You would not be able to do that if you use the hole saw stacking option. Do that, we're going to need some specialty tooling. Here's why this is so difficult, because we can't just simply take our 2 1/8 inch hole saw and run it in there. The pilot hole will not allow it to do that. The pilot hole is no longer there. It's too big. Okay, so we can't do that anymore. So it's going to need, we're going to have a jig so that this can actually go right through and hold it in place without it moving around. Yeah, he's right on the fiber doors and like even these cardboard doors. It's just so hard to get a perfect, nice line in there. So this is the Allen head that's going to come with your jig, and it just takes a turn or so, and it removes that set screw, and then these inserts will come right out. Okay, then save your inserts so you don't lose them. I just put them right in my bag, along with the Allen wrench. And that way you don't lose it. Now we're set up for 2 1/8 again. Okay. All righty. So now we've got some options with this particular installation. You'll notice that this is actually set at 2 3/4 inch backset. So this is actually set for the longer commercial backset. We can actually change that right now because we're changing the size of the hole, or we can keep it the same. I'm going to flip these little tabs in, and that's going to give me the 2 3/8 backset for residential installation, just like so. Okay, so we flip those little guys back into play, like so. And I did do that intentionally, just so everybody knows. I intentionally drilled it at that commercial backset for the smaller 1.5 inch hole, simply to display the fact that you can change the backset if somebody drilled it improperly. Very common for a handyman or somebody who doesn't know the difference of the backsets to just slap a jig on, and all of a sudden now the hardware's out of alignment on the door. I was aware of that and did it intentionally so that I could show you that it is possible to change it using the jig. And then voila, which would not be possible with hole saw stacking. Right in there, centered, everything looks good. And I'm gonna clamp it down, and you want to make sure that this setting here is engaged, but you want to, I like to clamp it to the door and then have this not touching it. Like so my whole setup is right here. Like I'll bring it closed where it's almost touching, and then I'll back that off just a little bit, and then I'll come back in here just like so. Okay. And then I clamp it back down like so, so that it does hit here and it throws that weight back up to the tip of it, so that now this thing does not move. Okay, will not move. And now you can see how I'm gonna enlarge the hole, and I can adjust the back set on this one right here. I'm actually going to transfer this from 2 3/8 to, I'm sorry, for 2 3/4 to 2 3/8 inch back set. And I'm going to do so using I do like to come at it from both sides, no matter if you have the jig or not. You always want to make sure you come at it from both sides so you don't blow out the wood. If it's on a metal door, it's really not going to matter. I still just get in that habit. But if you'd come in on one side and then continue to push that drill bit through, it could splinter and fracture the other side because it's coming out as opposed to cutting in. And then you'll get a big splinter that'll peel off, and that'll be outside the ring that gets covered up by your deadbolt, and it'll be a very poor installation. So just keep that in mind. Always come in from both sides, even if you can, like I've gotten in a hurry and just tried to go all the way through, but I'll score the other side first. You don't have to go all the way in. Just come in about 1/8 of an inch or so, or 1/4 of an inch, come back to the other side if it's a solid core door, and then you can get all the way through it. But you never want to blow out completely one way to the other. This is that difference between carbide. I could only find a carbide hole saw in 2 1/8. So the carbide will grab. Just being carbide versus a bimetal hole saw is all the difference in the world. Oh. Yeah. Three-quarter, 2 3/8. So this one obviously has the round hole, or the round portion. There's not a whole lot we can do here, unfortunately. They did not offer the square version. Schlage usually offers a square version that you can pop in and you can trade those plates out. Unfortunately, they did not give us that option in this case. Now, if this is a really important door and it needs to look absolutely perfect, what you could do is you could actually come back and you could Bondo that hole closed, or basically put Bondo around the corners or around the edge. And then you could come back in and you could use the router, or you could use the corner chisel, or whatever you want to do. It would be like giving you a little bit of a blank canvas to start with. So there is a way that you could come back to that. Very time consuming and very expensive to do so. You're gonna have to do Bondo, and then you're gonna have to do paint on top of it. And you're gonna have to match everything to match really nice. Really, really time consuming and difficult to do. Then you get the idea. We'll put our smart lock on here. Everything actually fits to the 2 1/8 inch size. And then that's pretty much it. Let's see if we got, let's see here. Batteries. And there we have it. Okay. Do we have questions, comments, concerns?
Just as a little side note, that 1 inch hole saw works very well to line your jig up so that the holes are exactly where they should be.
Right. Like we used it for the center to mark on the other side.
Put that in the jig and then put it on the
Yep.
door, and it'll line those holes up perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Yeah, we did that earlier too. For people that joined in a little bit late, you can take your 1 inch hole saw, already the perfect size. So just take your 1 inch hole saw and put it in the hole, close the door, give it a push, and it'll perfectly center mark your additional hole out there.
But I'm talking about when you're enlarging a hole, and you need to line up your jig, take your 1 inch and put it into the door, put it with your jig on it, put the hole saw through it, and that hole saw will center that hole up direct perfectly for the size that you need, and all you do is square it up.
Correct. Yep. Great points. Good stuff. John Hubel has said, great time to discuss hole saws and extract the collected wood and material jammed in the hole saw. So on this one, because that door was really super thin, this was the only opportunity I had to get the video after we got that particular jig. It's really thin and we didn't have to deal with that. It wasn't a problem here. If you're dealing with a solid core door, it's going to become a problem really quick. So the way I combat it, and anybody else is free to share their techniques with it, is number one, I'll come into it and I'll hear, you got to listen to the tool and you have to feel it. Okay. And I'll come in and I'll let the teeth load up with material. You can feel them, and then you almost feel kind of a hesitation or a pause, and you'll kind of feel it get heavy. That is the cut material rounding themselves in the teeth. There's no fluting in the hole saw to actually eject that material out of there very well. There's some holes cut in the side, but that it can and can't work sometimes. So you want to either remove it out of the working area, and I actually have a quick thing where I run it in reverse, and it'll reverse, and then it'll eject that material out as you come out. So it's kind of a back off opposite direction, rip, back in, rip, and then back off, rip. There are other products out there, like Josh is mentioning, with Milwaukee Quick Connect hole saws work really well too, where you can just simply disconnect it and you can empty it out. The Spider hole saws do the same as well. But that's more for the plug ejection than anything. Hold the same position of the door handle. So the tools and the hole saws that you use will also aid you in your process. I think the Spider Quick Connect is probably one of the easiest to use ones. It's got a big button on it, and the whole thing just pulls completely apart. Really easy to use. Milwaukee may have one, but the hole saws that you use could come into play with that as well. Anthony Porter says, I apologize in the beginning. Did you go over making sure the hole is in the same position as the door handle? Yes, I intentionally drilled the first 1.5 inch hole at the 2 3/4 backset, or commercial backset, if you will, specifically to demonstrate the tool, and knowing that I would re-drill that hole to show you that you can change the backset of a particular hole if drilled incorrectly the first time using the jig. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. All righty. Do we have any other questions, comments, or concerns?
When we cut a hole with a jig, we don't use that particular jig, but using a quick set jig, if you remove the edge bolt, the setting tends to fall into that little slot a little bit. We usually leave the bolt in position and then eyeball it from the edge. You can get exact squareness of the jig onto the door, and just be careful not to cut into it until you get your cut start on the face of the door.
Correct. So that would be if you're not doing a fresh installation and we're separating the two. The little ears that pop out that determine the backset, there's a bunch of different jigs out there. There's Quickset and all the other ones. But if you do a fresh installation, the backset will be accurate. If you're doing a conversion and you're either adjusting the backset or you're enlarging an existing hole or you're recentering an existing hole, what John is saying is those backset tabs will fall into the part that's already been chiseled out of the door, and therefore it will skew your alignment, and you'll actually be about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch in, depending on how much they cut out of there. Whatever that mortise thickness is, you'll be set that far in, and then it'll mess with your alignment and your lock won't align properly and it won't be butter smooth. So excellent point, John. Thank you very much for bringing that up. A lot more to installing deadbolts than people really realize. It is a technical process, and for the longest time, it always took at least an hour to install these things. And like I say, you can spend as much time as you want to on it to get that look that you want. But 30 minutes to an hour, you're right in the good zone. So make sure you bid that appropriately. If you're going to do a professional installation, make sure you charge a professional price for it, because the handyman's going to charge 30 or 50 bucks to install that thing. And you're going to get a handyman plastic jig installation to go along with that as well. And they're going to be really lucky that it doesn't break and they get a hole saw, marks all the way across their door when it gets away from them. So great point, John. Thank you so much.
Wayne, did you get a chance to mention where to install the deadbolts, or if it's an add-on lock, making it match a standard industry standard of 4 or 5.5 inches, just in case someone has to hook a connected lock later on down the line?
I did not go over that. That would be a good point to do, both at the very beginning. We would need to make sure that it's installed within the industry standard 36 to 48 inches. So you've got to be in that goodie zone, first of all. And then, yes, you would have to install it. What is the exact measurement for the deadbolt from the...
Most are 4 or 5.5 are the industry standards.
5.5.
And some of the manufacturers that have interconnected locks sit right at that money mark. And if you don't have it, you got to rebore some holes, and it makes a mess.
Yes. Yep. I personally, after 10 years, I've probably only dealt with those interconnected locks a handful of times, especially with doing a conversion. So it's not something that I think about too often, but you are correct. That would be the industry standard. So if you did have to put an interconnected lock, something that has a lever that's connected to the deadbolt, you would be saving yourself and the person that comes after you a tremendous amount of time and heartache had they needed to convert that over. But again, this jig also is a lifesaver, because if you run into a job where it is not prepped correctly, you can adjust it so that it is prepped correctly.
Hey,
Great.
John, can you hear me, John? Can't hear me, Kenny.
I think you can. Go ahead.
Oh, John, if you need, when Quickset quit making those jigs, I bought up everything I could find. If you need any parts, holler, I may have something.
Thank you. They last forever, and I've got a few of them, but thank you.
Yeah, I bought everything I could find on the market simply because it was the only thing available at the time.
It should come with a hacksaw to cut off that 5.5 inch hole, though.
That's the first thing I cut off. It's gone immediately. I actually managed to break mine. The aluminum point, the point
Really?
between where the two, notice how I was mentioning you tighten that first one down and then the other one kind of throws the weight onto the front of it. That cracked, and I had it re-welded 3 different times from a professional aluminum welding company, and it never took it. It was forever weakened, unfortunately, after that. So after that, that's when we graduated to the or I'm sorry, the Framon Manufacturing A1.
I like the looks of that frame, and that's a neat package.
Yeah, it is. It's simple. It's affordable. You know,
It's
there
small.
are more expensive ones out there. If you want to spend $800 on a jig, you can do that. And it comes with all the bells and whistles. But if you just want something that'll fit in your bag, that's not plastic, that's metal, that does just about everything and has those convenient little tabs, I'm telling you, I really like it. I have the more expensive ones, and this one's in my bag, to be perfectly honest. So
Wayne, can you address another item? And that is when you
Sure.
clamp the jig to a door, what methods are people using to make sure it doesn't scar the door or grab the paint and pull the paint off, et cetera, et cetera?
I did address that in the beginning. This jig actually has like a rubber or foam type of material behind it. If your jig does not have that, so Framon thought of that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. And then also the technique, everything comes down to clamping that on the door. If you clamp it on the door properly and you make sure the weight gets thrown back on the tip, so it's not all at the edge. Like I actually grab that jig and move it up and down so that it doesn't move while I'm drilling it. It's more important. I can take a little bit if it moves while I'm shaking on it. I can't fix it if that drill bit grabs and that hole saw hooks up and it moves it right up out of the way. But you could also use painter's tape. If you have an older jig or a different one, you can throw some painter's tape on that door and you would prevent that from scarring. I wouldn't use Gorilla Tape or anything like that because you're going to press it into the door. And then when you peel it back off, it's going to peel half the door along with it. It's too sticky. But painter's tape is an excellent friend of installing deadbolts. Is that what you use, John?
You do, but I actually put it on the jig and not the door. I've actually had painter's tape pull off crummy paint jobs on a door.
Ah, well, there you go. There's another way to think about it, is to do the opposite and actually put the painter's tape on the jig itself.
In the early days, I used to grab the instructions and just wrap it around the door and stick it, make that the paper base. But I've learned that actually, if it gets too hot, the print from the imported instructions will actually go onto the paint too.
You silly puttied it on there. Good stuff.
Yes.
Good stuff. Great questions, John. I appreciate, as always, you always manage to think of things that I skip over, no matter how detailed I try and be. And it's amazing to have a second set of eyes to be able to look at things from a different lens and be able to bring all these things together. And really what happens when we do that is John brings up excellent points. The man he's probably forgotten more than I know in this industry and been doing it longer than before I was born. So it's nice to have that contradiction and that counter back and forth. John's going to see things that I don't see. I'm going to see some things that he may not see. And together, when we bring this to a presentation like this, the audience is the one that gets all of that information wrapped into one. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Fun stuff? All right. Well, we'll see you next week. Next couple ones that are going to be coming up, we're going to be doing some training. We're going to cover some of the information that we're doing during our training. We're going to give some free information away, and we're going to show you what those live in-person training classes are going to look like. So stay tuned, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for everybody that joined. And yeah, put the tape on the tool. Last couple questions. Did this, but it still pulled the paint. Yeah. Great member tonight. Thank you. Great tool. Cool. Great. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.